So greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing the album Not of This World by the band Pendragon.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So before we get into this album and review, here are some of my favorite bits from this album. Recently I've been listening to more neo-prog on this channel and I started to realize just what my thoughts were on this subgenre of prog, and I realized that I don't really like it that much and the way music is made on it. And then this album came. So I'm gonna summarize what I think about things. So you basically have neo-prog. Now the idea of neo-prog is bands that were inspired by the greats of the 70s. So you have a band like Marillion that came in the 80s that were really inspired by a band known as Genesis that is in the 70s. But neo-prog also talks about other bands that came a lot afterwards. So you have, for example, RPWL that were inspired by, yes, those greats in the 70s, but they were also really heavily inspired by punk and grunge music and, you know, stuff that came later on. So looking at those two as being equals on the neo-prog scale is really odd to me, because honestly neo-prog has bands that were influenced by other neo-prog bands that they were themselves influenced by the greats of the 70s. So you have this indirect influence of inspiration, and thus you have this genre of a lot of people being influenced by so many other different things that the music itself doesn't really feel like the good symphonic prog of the 70s. Oof, what a mouthful, but basically what I'm trying to get at is the fact that today's album by Pendragon, although it came out in 2001, feels like it was directly influenced by Genesis and Pink Floyd from the 70s. And as an overgeneralization, I'd say that the leading instrument on this album is the guitar, which really has a playing that is akin to the playing of David Gilmour, and also the vocals on here really sound like the lead vocalist is like a Peter Gabriel trying to do a David Gilmour impression, so that's like a kind of an odd thing. And except for The Lost Children, which I think that track has vocals that sound really like what you'd get if you take David Gilmour's vocals and Roger Waters' vocals and just put them together, and then you got this thing. So if I understand correctly, this album is supposed to be a conceptual album that represents a play going on, which features the human life cycle or the, process of creation, and I think that's a big thing to actually experience and talk about. Now, there are 9 songs on here, but they are divided into subparts, which go something like this. So song 1 is If I Were the Wind and You Were the Rain, but then we have the first part, which is the Dance of 7 Vials, in which we have It's All Over Now and Faithless, I think in the opposite order. Then we have the second part, which is titled Not of This World, which consists of 3 parts, which is Not of This World, Give It to Me, and Green-Eyed Angel. Then we have the standalone A Man of Nomadic Traits, followed lastly by the part called World's End, which consists of 2 tracks, which are The Lost Children and the last one, which is called And Finally. And each part basically acts, as I see it, as a stage in a grand play. So this is my first time actually listening to Pendragon, and I'm supposed to see them in Germany this summer, so I'm really expecting that. But I was expecting me to, get sort of disappointed because I saw the categorization of neo-prog, but I was really flustered when this album actually turned out to be a good album. So if I was prepared to be disappointed, I actually came out as glad-appointed, if that makes any it doesn't make any sense, doesn't it? But what can I say? This album is really great. It doesn't take you on like, straight paths of repetition all the time. It goes to and it goes fro, and I love it so much because it's so dynamic, as prog should be in my opinion. And I think the title track of Not of This World is a great example for it. You actually get like all of the instruments that are playing simultaneously, and they all sound at their best at the same time, and I love it so much, and I think that's a great song, but I wouldn't actually go with it as my favorite. I would actually say that the third track is my favorite. It's called All Over Now. I think it features great songwriting, great progressiveness, and it is overall a fantastic song to listen to, which I had a fantastic time going ahead and re-listening to a couple of times now. Oh, and one thing I noticed about this album, of course it's really hard to notice these things on the first listen, but I did notice that on the fourth track, the title track, you actually have this line. I think it goes something like flesh and blood, I'm a human being, and then you have like the last lines on the last track which recall to that line, but this time it's actually flesh and blood, they were human beings. So yeah, it has like this hint of mortality and morbidity in it, and I like it very much. I love the recall. And I've read reviews of other Pendragon, fans out there, and I've seen that there's one criticism that goes for this album, and it's the fact that if you already know their prior discography, a lot of people say that this album just kind of copies what came before it, and I can totally get that because a lot of bands try and do that as their successful formula. But as myself, that I do not know other albums by Pendragon, I found this to be a great standalone album as it is. Now, don't get me wrong, this album isn't perfect, it does stall here and there, and it's not like all the way fantastic, but it is refreshingly surprising from all the other neo-prog albums we've listened to so far, and I'm really expressing my, happiness with it because I believe that's what good neo-prog music should sound like. No, this is not a good cover. No, way overcrowded. But I will say something about it. I think that the imagery on here is supposed to represent each and every song. I'm not entirely sure about that, but there is death, there's life, there's Adam and Eve, and I think the most giving one of all is you have this nomad going off in the desert, which really sounds like the tale told in a man of nomadic traits. But as I said, there is too much on here. There's no, overlying piece that really connects everything to one another. There's so many things on it. It's like they were told, yeah, just make as many details as you can and try and put them all in one cover. And he did that exactly, and I don't like how this came out. Yes, I am a simple cover purist. Fight me. So when it comes to the rating of this album, I wanted to give it an 8 out of 10, but I don't think that's fitting, but I am going to rate this one a very high 7 out of 10. I think it's a great album, I think it's fun, but it's not something that I really want to come back to, at least not now, because there's still not a lot of memorable moments on here which I really loved and want to listen to them over and over again. Still, it's a good album that I highly advise for anyone to actually go ahead and give and listen to. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to yet another Tool album. This time it's going to be 10,000 by Tool, or is it 10,000 Days? I think it is. But never mind, just come to that video, it's going to be fantastic. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this one and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.